This review calls for some wine, I felt. Hello everybody, today I am going to be reviewing Texas Chainsaw Massacre, not the original film, the new Netflix film, which is technically a sequel to the original. And if I have wine in the review, it typically means it wasn't a very good movie. And yes, this is another pointless film that is really attempting to bank off, original ideas while interjecting all kinds of social commentary word vomit, contrasting the present political landscape with the more like Vietnam era hardness of more the baby boomers. An era, of course, which is dying out, but of course populated the initial film, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre film, in the 1970s. And yes, the original film did have a lot of social commentary for sure. You could really feel kind of the relentless drive of violence in this kind of grainy look to the movie, which did remind us of televised Vietnam War era. It's a commentary on the way we perceive violence in that particular time and how it was changing. It's commentary on social class, animal cruelty, even human cruelty, etc. And yet the conceptual kind of dog-eat-dog quality to it is the driving force. There is a simplicity ultimately at the center of it, which I think is why it works. There's a lack of pretentiousness, I think, to it. But the artistry is just very skillfully employed in the original film. And this one from 2022 feels more just like a social justice warrior commentary, but it's very constipated in its commentary. It's just hitting us over the head, no pun intended, to the degree that there's just no room for any authenticity. I think this film has such an intent to try to be very consciously aware of the social and political landscapes today that it sort of loses its intent, I think, or I should say it loses the initial intent of the whole idea behind Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This film isn't a situation where you're just following youths, it's more kind of judging them in a certain way. So these people are never allowed to be fully dimensional people. They feel more like they were written as like social media account profiles rather than actual characters. And they do attempt to blur the lines between kind of the ethics of the modern day, as I said, compared to the old times, which naturally the newer generation resists and deems archaic. Yet there is a hypocrisy there because they are benefiting very much from late-stage capitalism, and that's a really, really silly metaphor that is hammered in there. So you have a lot of overt symbolism, but it's all in kind of like these big clusters, these big clumps that are just kind of thrown at your face, all twisting together. And in a way, even though the story itself isn't complicated, a lot of the the personal interactions, the personal relationships within this ensemble do feel overly complicated because it destroys a lot of the climactic tension. Again, less is more. It's the simplicity that is most important, I think, in what makes Texas Chainsaw Massacre so successful. You have man with chainsaw in Texas and you have young people running from him. And that's it. Like, you really don't need that much more, and you can do all kinds of things with that. But I think you got to be careful. Be careful what you're honing in on. Like I said, it's making this big capitalist commentary for sure, and you see that in the opening. And then you have these young people who have this whole intent to create this kind of kombucha bar haven in the middle of nowhere, which already makes, very little sense. And I know it's meant to kind of highlight the naivete, but even for that, it feels a little bit too cartoony for my taste. The film does attempt to blur the lines between the generational gap. You've got these gruff kind of traditional people that live in these rural areas and like an old woman with a house with a Confederate flag on it. And this is a commentary on gun violence, which, can be compelling, but, I didn't expect much from this film and I didn't get much. There's just too much stuff. There's too many words rather than, again, having the confidence in more the ideas. And they're creating all of these different story threads that I think kind of weigh the whole concept down and just they stifle the viscera completely. And the story isn't set up to where it builds any climactic tension so that when the violence actually does occur and lets rip, there just isn't much of a payoff. And again, in terms of more the emotion, because everything is so judged. There's just a sense of judgment with the film that every character here has to be basically a mouthpiece or a cardboard cutout. And then suddenly, we have all of these kind of, these Tourette-like sort of spouts of violence in between. And just the quality of that initial film, just like the surfacey, like the details of everything, the textures, and just the little sounds and images, they're like splinters in your mind and they always stay with you. And here they're drained of any viscera or grit. And weirdly, even though there's a ton of violence in this movie, and it's very kind of in your face, it felt muted to me. Here they're going more for like an 80s gore cheese fest that has more in common, I think, with like Freddy Krueger than Leatherface. And even so, there's a lot of fun. There's cheekiness, there's artificiality you can really play with if you're going to go that route of more like the 80s look, because the key to those movies is what? It's the camp, you know, it's the humor. Campy, though, here without a sense of danger or emotion is, you know, the huge problem. I don't know if that could work even in a good director's hands, because camp is just not what I think about when I think about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original. Each act of violence in that original film it's like a strange subliminal peek into that era, into the mind of somebody that age in the 1970s. All of it is felt and hinted at, you know, in a way where it never has to be uttered. Just the image of like that zoom into Sally's eye in the original, just like the capillaries, like all of that is so incredibly expressionistic, enough that it sort of bleeds into your state of being. You never forget that type of shot. That is the quality that I'm looking for, kind of that artful flair within the grit. And yeah, here it's like I wanted to see a little bit of creativity, at least with that, but a lot of the tangibility of the sound that you get in that original film that's so prevalent is drowned out here with a lot of electronic kind of twists and ambience and all that stuff. And again, it makes everything feel muted. How can you be excited about a jump scare when the film is afraid of silence? But I have to admit, I would be lying if I didn't say that I really enjoyed the bus scene. Just kind of if I take the whole thing out of context, I found it to be kind of fun. There is just something very satisfying to seeing like all these spoiled millennials and Gen Xers in this bus, and suddenly Leatherface comes out and just like eviscerates all of them. That is the one time they use a set piece to their advantage, and there is, you know, a sense of humor to it. And it's the one time I feel like they're really embracing the camp with a little bit of nuance, a little bit of creativity. It's the most cinematic of anything, and I don't consider this film necessarily that cinematic, even though there are some lovely shots in it. But is it in the spirit of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Absolutely not. But again, if I take myself out of it and I'm just watching this scene, I don't know. I thought it was very funny, and it committed to the concept. And then it sort of reveled in it. And I think, again, that's important, and stop being so conscious of everything. It's okay to lose yourself. But yeah, when you watch a lot of the rest of it, there's just, again, not much creativity. A lot of just basic horror cliches hiding under the bed, like the squeaks of of the springs in the bed, creaking staircases, etc., etc. Sally here, who of course was the protagonist in the original film, the lone survivor in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, is back again, and she's back with vengeance. And she's here, of course, just as a basic device, which is really insulting to the initial material. She's here to bridge the gap narratively and also show us how far we've progressed as a collective. Of course, she was absolutely traumatized by the events of the 1970s to the point where she's never moved on with her life, again, to a cartoonish extent. You know, she became a hermit and an old woman living, you know, just like Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. The old hermit from the initial film is, you know, quite a common archetype. The problem is when you reduce that person to a device. It's much more interesting when you bring that person back and they serve a purpose and they gain something, building on that initial storyline, but not here, of course. Again, reduced to just a cardboard cutout, this crazy old lady that is out for vengeance. And she is so fixated on her past and her killer to such an extent. It's almost as if the writers didn't care that there were decades in between that. It's almost as if Sally turned old right after the credits started rolling for the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because there is no attempt to build any sort of character at all. What happened to her in all of that time? I'm sure she got some hobbies. I'm sure she tried to find some happiness along the way, but no. Crazy old lady, vengeance. There's just an essence of condescension, I think, in these remakes, in these sequels, where, you know, we have to make a mockery of the original protagonist. And suddenly they are a cardboard cutout, a pawn in a story for a newer generation, where there is nothing of value that is added. It's very much like a William Shatner in, you know, Star Trek Generations, you know, because he's just there to be Captain Kirk, William Shatner. Star Trek Generations felt like a masterpiece compared to this schlock, because Sally is great here. I love when she has like a cowboy hat and she's got a shotgun and she literally says, she says to Leatherface, like, say my name. She carries around a Polaroid of her dead friends from the 70s again, clearly has no hobbies or interests other than being a badass. They're going for like this Sarah Connor thing, but like without the pathos of the second Terminator film. And I really like it when she's like, "I got you, motherfucker." It's fantastic. So bad that it's almost iconic, but not quite. It's lacking a little bit of creativity, even in the shittiness of it. But yeah, this movie is all over the place tonally. It's just a very confused story where I'm looking at the writing, I'm looking at the way it judges these characters, the way it kind of tries to set them up in a certain way to make a commentary, but yet I'm a little bit confused on what the commentary is, and I'm confused at what exactly is being accomplished here. What is the statement you're trying to make? It feels like a strange muddled cocktail of like, you know, social media posts. These new characters, of course, to hammer in the whole social commentary. There's a big commentary on gun violence here because these youths are victims of a school shooting, naturally. So you have to give these characters an arc where naturally, you know, they're criticizing gun violence, especially in the rural areas of the South, but eventually they must use that violence in order to self-actualize as characters. And I think that could be interesting if done well, but it's very hard to do that well, especially in this current movie climate for sure. Especially when there is so little emotion that's tying us to the past, so little emotion that's tying us just to this entire concept of this film. There is so little authenticity that these people almost felt like woke dolls that are on the market where you just like press a button and they say something really woke, like, "Oh my God, why does that guy have a gun? Is he overcompensating for something?" So there was one that I genuinely laughed at and found entertaining, and it was when Leatherface gets on the bus and everyone holds up their phones and that guy is like, "I'm gonna cancel you, bro." Fantastic. This movie is just another example of all the things I constantly complain about, you know, the same sad state of movies and their need to make commentary on everything, particularly meta commentary. Unable to have the confidence to trust in your own story and exist kind of, you know, as its own entity while also kind of bridging the gap between the stories. But also the key, understanding your source material. When I watch this film, I don't get the sense that the director understood the source material at all, beyond what is just very, very basic. It feels almost like he went to film school and he went to the chapter that was on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and he read about its impact. And he took that and decided to make this movie based on just reading that. It's like he copied and pasted the social commentary aspects of everything and just, you know, put them into the movie, again, without any nuance or anything like that. It's like he's not trying to understand the effect. He more just kind of wants to gaze at it from a bird's eye view. And part of the power of it is being affected by it while also kind of looking at it from an outward perspective, I think. Understanding the tone and using that as the basis, as the core to kind of spread the chaos in this new story, I think is what you should do. You should be giving us a feeling like, oh, fuck, here we go again. None of that. None of it, none of it, none of it in this movie. But yeah, you know, it's terrible. It's what you expected. I think, like I said, there are some nice shots and there are, you know, there's one set piece that I did, you know, enjoy just on a basic entertainment level. But yeah, I can't recommend this. I don't see how anybody could recommend it, but you know, to each their own. Thank you guys so much for watching the review. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I am an artist and I do commission portraits and I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question on a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who have been wonderful. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you are interested in becoming a patron, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.